So welcome back, everybody. You've got Tim, Bill, and Richard. Today, instead of talking about a specific creature throughout the different editions of Dungeons and Dragons, we're talking about level draining teachers. I like to call these creatures that allow your characters to have summer levels because some levels are there, some are not.
Mhm.
They do occasionally disappear. So I like having Bill and Richard on to do this kind of stuff because Bill, you're the first edition guy who has read fifth edition instead of the one who thinks you're going to get cooties when you touch it. Um,
Oh, but I do. But go on.
but but doesn't he? I thought you liked cooties for some reason. What's wrong with
That depends on where I'm getting them from.
That's fair. And Richard, you worked at Wizards of the Coast, and were there during fifth and of course Magic. So on the art side. And
Yep.
I loved the art. Some of the even if you go back to first edition, I love some of the art. I don't love others, but fifth edition, I think they've come a long way on including multicolor, color art throughout the whole thing. And if I could ever like get Wizards of the Coast in the room, the one thing I would tell them is like, can we please have black and white pages instead of like cream pages with different tints behind it, and then you have this font in front of it. Just my eyes are old, and the
That
contrast
was
works for me.
that.
So
Not to derail this quick, but that was one of the biggest turnoffs with third edition, with
yeah.
those cockroach wing colored sepia tone pages, man. I know they
Yep.
were going for the make it look like an ancient tome, but guys, that is not conducive to everybody bitches about the small fonts in the AD&D books, but it's black on bright white 60-pound paper, you
Yeah,
know?
Yep.
I would love to have black and just I don't know, something with a contrast. It doesn't
Yeah.
work for well. And anyway,
Yeah, that to me is like design wise, that's the equivalent to when the background music is just a little too loud and you can't hear the characters, you know.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, I think there was a lot of debate about that actually, to tell you the truth. There was a
It's
lot
like
of
it's like dormers on a one-story house. Why?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It, I look at myself and I look around and I ask myself why about a whole lot of things today. And since there's a presidential debate later, which I don't want to talk about, I'm quite sure I'll be asking that a lot more by the end of the day. Um, but that's just a whole nother subject. So that's not what we're here to talk about. The level draining creatures. So the reason I wanted to do this one is because I hadn't thought about level draining creatures in probably 10 years. And then I'm in Bill's Tuesday night game, and we came across a white. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, or white, however you
You
want to
are.
pronounce it.
You are.
And if you go in and you're a fighter and you're fifth level and you got 44 hit points, and you come out and you're a fighter and your maximum is now 30, you you have a whole different problem to go deal with for the rest of your character's life. And these creatures, I don't think really get their due. I think they get used very sporadically. Maybe that's good, but I think if you really want to take a group of experienced players and have them come up against an enemy that is not just okay, everybody run and attack, right? You actually have to think about how you attack. What's your strategy, right? Because there's ways you can do it and not experience level drain, and there's ways you can do it and guarantee you're going to experience level drain. There's just sort of nothing in the middle. So
Yeah.
Richard, I know Bill's opinion on these things. He loves it. He's like, I'll teach those guys a lesson. Uh, you're the forever DM. Do you use these things on occasion?
I used them back in the day here and there. I remember one time I used them because I'm actually very I've probably played more AD&D than I have fifth, to tell you the truth,
Mhm.
because when we played AD&D we played it like 24/7.
Of
um
course, everybody did.
yeah, yeah.
It's like just
No,
slide
I almost
pizza.
had
It's like just slide pizza under the door and leave us alone, right? That's just
I did almost have players choke me to death when when I use like they were like what, but I found it interesting. There was one part I really like mechanically, or the effect they had on the game. Definitely was like, wow, I'm afraid of these things. Um, but it was also very kind of weird because, like you're saying, they're sort of on niche monsters.
Mhm.
So you might face somebody like that's a much more powerful creature or something like a dragon or something, and it wouldn't quite have that dread. So I often thought like that's a neat mechanic, but maybe it's maybe it would fit somewhere else to move that dread mechanically to somewhere else.
That would be an interesting thought to take like a vampire, a level draining creature, and put it as like the minor boss right in front of like a blue dragon. Right? You're, you're about to go up against the blue dragon. Well, your hit points just got cut in half, but you can heal up to your maximum, but your maximum is not what it was 20 minutes ago, man. You're kind of in real trouble. So that'd be an interesting evil invention. I might have to try that one of my kids and see if they jihad on me. All right, so let's take a look at what I have for examples of these creatures that will just kill you quickly. Vampire, which I've got both the first and the fifth edition versions up here. I really the character stats haven't really changed. They're rare. They kind of come in little groups, but the stats might have different numbers on them, but realistically they're not much different. But the thing I like is vampires in literature have changed. They've been all over the map, and you got sort of the Bela Lugosi version, and then you got the ones that sparkle in the sunlight that we won't talk about too much. But I don't know, Richard, do you know the history of this artwork at all? Because I kind of like them both in different ways.
I actually don't know that piece right off. I believe the one on the right of the castle might have been done by Vince Prose. He's a really great artist. He's done a lot of stuff. He does a lot of movie stuff. Like he worked on It, Shape of Water, all that kind of stuff. Vince does great stuff. The other artist, and if they're out there watching, I totally apologize. I forget who that is.
It's one of those movies that made me not everyone
the old school one is Trampier, of course.
Yeah,
can't beat Dave Trampier.
He's definitely channeling the Christopher Lee vibe in that one.
Yep.
Christopher Lee is one of those guys. If anybody watching is not familiar with Christopher Lee, there's a lot of stories going around about him, but he was a World War II veteran who was a no kidding kind of combat veteran. That when Peter Jackson tried to explain what somebody being stabbed in the back would sound like or how they would react, he goes, no, let me explain it to you for real. And he went into such detail. Everybody went, how did you know that? And he goes, well, I was in World War II. And everybody went, okay, enough. Which is so
that's not what a man being stabbed sounds like, Peter.
Exactly.
That's a great Christopher Lee impression, man. That was top-notch.
That's a fade shadow of what my friend Clark does. He did one the other night. We were talking about that story, and I just about spit my coffee out.
But he was one of those old men who you could like sit and drink tea with, and he would let you decide how the night was going to go. You can either drink tea and have a conversation, or he'd stab you in the neck. Either way is fine with him. He doesn't care, and you get to kind of decide how that night goes. So he was an interesting guy. Sadly, one I never got a chance to meet at all, but we all have his films to remember him by. But he was an incredible actor. He lived a phenomenal life, and there's pictures and stories all over about him. And even if only half of those stories are true, I'm like, good Lord.
Yeah.
But anyway, so vampires haven't really changed. They are in there, of course. The Strahd adventures. Who can ever forget those? That's kind of what they're for. Ravenloft, some of the classic stuff that goes through. I really hope Ravenloft kind of comes back to the foray much more than it has, but we'll see if it ever does. I really liked it. But I was weird. So, all right, the white. Now again, Trampier art and the older stuff. And I don't know who did this one. I should probably look that up, but, the one thing that strikes me as you go throughout the editions, and I'd love to hear both of you guys' opinion on this, is, it's late 70s, early 80s printing technology really limited you on what you could do, right? You just couldn't do what you can do today and have it really come out correct, at least without costing, more than your first house. And today you can do a lot more. So I think the white, as shown in fifth edition, is a much more impressive creature, but for the tech they had to work with, Trampier again, man, just make something that's just creepy.
Yeah, Dave had this ability, and you can see this in virtually every piece he does. He had the ability to make his illustrations look like woodcut, even though they were pen and ink. And I absolutely loved that about Trampier's artwork. And I mean, it's so funny how so much great art in AD&D was years before um some of the heaviest of the heavy metal rolled around, and yet you can see how Trampier and Otis and Sutherland and LaForce and well, everybody, how their stuff kind of informed that uh that vibe, that aesthetic. And looking at the white on the left, I always, when I was a kid, because it was the 80s when I was playing first edition AD&D, it was published in the 70s. I always got this like Ronnie James Dio vibe out of the white on the left. But as far as capabilities, the white is the first level draining undead. As a D&D player, if you start with that most foundational of modules, keep on the borderlands, the white is the creature that you're going to the level draining creature you're going to encounter first and foremost. And it's one of those things that um it it remains essentially on the same level, with the exception of a cleric's ability to turn. And of course, for our viewers who are maybe, you're not 100% hip to the lingo, that's holding up a cross or a holy symbol or making a holy sign and forcing the undead back. If you think about Dracula seeing, cross in Van Helsing's hand and recoiling from that, that's turning undead. It's a special uh, power that clerics and to a lesser degree paladins have in Dungeons and Dragons. But whites are creatures that you can stick as penultimate boss monsters in low level modules as singular creatures. Like there is one white in Keep on the Borderlands. And those of you who watch my live streaming show remember, it lunged up and grabbed the half orc fighter Vrug and cost him levels.
Yep.
And but if you look at the number appearing 2 to 16, there's a chance that even a high level cleric won't be able to, in a single instance, drive all of them back at once. That there may be a few leakers, as they say, when you're talking about military defense. You still get a few through the perimeter. And so this mere 4 hit die creature, average of 19 hit points, is suddenly in amongst your party of 7th, 8th level characters, wreaking havoc. And that's a beautiful thing from a dungeon master standpoint to watch, because one touch, down a level, another touch, down a level. And if they're hitting the cleric, which they should be doing, then his ability to repel them is also getting worse.
Yeah,
So
because they're not stupid creatures, right? Intelligence of 10. It knows who the neat person it needs to drive away first is. So it's
yes. And
Yeah.
if it's
after that cleric.
if it's holding up its holy symbol and commanding some of this thing's fellows back, then obviously let's get the cleric first. And then, we'll have our veggies and then we'll have our dessert later. So the white is such a great animal to use, monster to use in singles, as again that terrifying boss monster for low level parties, or in a huge pack for use against high level parties, and that's where it really comes into its own. And of all the level draining undead, this is one of my favorites.
Mhm.
How about you, Bill? Or Richard? Have you ever, as a DM, decided this party's pissing me off? We need to teach them a lesson.
Of course not. I'm a fair judge, and I never punished players. No, I used to like Bill would probably agree with this too, because there was a thing I think we both threw in on adversarial GMing.
Mhm.
I wouldn't call it adversarial, but
I have gotten so much flack.
consequences, like consequences are real.
But
Yeah.
professorial, you've got to teach the party something.
You know, I posted that up on Twitter, and so many people were hung up on the word adversarial. It's like they didn't
Yes.
disagree with me on my methodology or the outcomes expected or produced, but they were like, dude, you can't say you're adversarial. To which I say, why not? You know,
It's one of those things. It's like if you took it, if I said, okay, the role of the dungeon master will be done by computer AI in this video game, right?
mm-hmm.
And said, well, don't make that AI adversarial though. It's like, well, it's the AI for the adversaries, right? So I like making them like if the creature is not smart, I make them not smart. If they're smarter, I make them smart to very clever if I can. And yeah, they're out to like get the players. They have strategies and things. I think that makes the game interesting.
Right.
The other thing early on when I was DMing, I realized that my players, I don't know if you got this too, Bill, but my players hit way above their weight class because they were very clever. Like all that stuff that was not on the character sheet or just like crazy tactics or I want to try this. So I had to beef things up to sort of keep them entertained.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot, and yeah, I'm gonna get my old man yells at cloud badge for the day, but that's why I don't think that third edition, and I don't know if they did this in 4E, but the challenge rating thing, that's where I think that absolute, challenge rating breaks down, because you can have a low level party that by either sheer weight of numbers or just brain power is hitting way above their weight class in terms of ability. And then conversely, you can have a group of optimized 7th, 8th, 9th level characters come in,
Yep.
and they're staggering around like idiots, relying on, well, it's on my sheet, so therefore I don't have to worry about it. And the minute you go off script and give them something that they can't sense motive or do whatever feat on the sheet, they just vapor lock, and they're fodder for your darkest amusements.
I just want to correct one thing, Bill. You mentioned this 4th edition version of Dungeons and Dragons. I don't believe that actually exists. I think that's just a
Sure, right.
it's like I hear these rumors about the 3rd Godfather movie, and I don't believe that's actually out there anywhere. I think
Yeah.
I think people are mistaken.
I'm the same with that fan film that came out after Aliens in 1986. I'm like, look, would I love another Alien movie? Absolutely. I just wish someone would make one.
Exactly. And I obviously play 5th edition, but even 4th edition, even I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
So the Wraith, another one that has a tendency to do that. And I want to point something out, that number appearing 2 to 12, they don't come by themselves typically.
Ooh, they don't.
So here's another one that can take down. Here's a group of 2 could do a TPK if you're not really careful.
Yep.
It does have some special defenses, just like in the previous case with the white. I want to point out, you just poison it can get exhausted. No, it's immune to both of those things, right? It's immune to both poison and exhaustion.
Yep.
Here we got one. special defenses against magic weapons and silver. Well, you can't bring out your heavy artillery and just start fireballing it to death. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
You got to kill it creatively.
Yep.
And I should point out that the Wraith, as the name might imply, at least it's my understanding. It's just one of those things like maybe we should get Rob Kuntz in on one of these calls one day, but it's my understanding that the Wraiths rather were lifted almost whole cloth from the ring Wraiths in Tolkien, which they're powerless in sunlight. They have a chilling touch. Yeah, that kind of jives. Of course, the professor was not talking in terms of levels and so on and everything, but definitely the black breath, as it were, from Al-Farazan and the others of the nine. One could say that it models into the chilling touch or the loss of a level. So I like the Wraith for exactly the same reasons I like the White.
Well, see, I mean, here's as a player, like you got to look at these conditioned immunities, right? It can't be charmed, exhausted, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, or restrained. You can't do any of that, so that takes a whole lot of stuff out of it. Damage resistant to acid, cold, fire, lightning, thunder, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks not made with silvered weapons. So basically, you get two options. Your magic user has to do something, or you got to just run the other way as if you're Forrest Gump and you just saw a Canadian goose.
Yeah.
So, Bill, I have to ask you, you've used level drain more in games probably than I have. Did it significantly reduce the amount of Christmas cards you received each year? How did your players react? How did your players react to it? Mine hated it, but it was just the game, so we kept going.
Yeah, essentially the same. I've never had anyone throw a fit. The only real pushback against level drain I have ever seen is from bitter non-gamers. People who just want to sit and discuss theory, but when you ask them about their games, they'll go silent. And the argument is always, well, it doesn't make sense. This thing touches you and suddenly you're not as capable of a fighter and so on, to which I say, I point back to the examples with Tolkien, that was certainly taxing on Frodo, when he was touched by Al-Farazan on Weathertop. It's never been a problem from people who are at the table. They just go shucks and proceed to worry about leveling up from
Bill, we're not on your channel. You can use the word they actually use, because I don't believe it's shucks.
Rhymes with shucks.
Yeah.
But you're from Richard, you're from Canada. Everybody's polite, right?
Thank you, eh? Thank you, Tim. You're a lovely man, eh?
And they just say fucking A.
Fucking A, right?
Fucking
Keep your puck on the ice.
But no, they the players generally react unhappily, but they very quickly get over it and realize, hey, this thing's got treasure type E. We knock it off and we can get some good loot out of it. And I mean, I've had players face a lot of whites or a lot of wraiths. There have been some level drains. And then just by dint of the stuff that was in the treasure pile and the XP they got from killing them, when they got back to civilization, they just leveled right back up.
Assuming they walked out of the dungeon.
Assuming they walked out of the dungeon and didn't join the cold parade. But the reaction from bitter non-gamers is, well, that doesn't make any, how am I a less effective fighter just because this thing touches me? That doesn't make any sense. To which I say what I always say: this is a game where an exceptionally clever 15 or 16-year-old child or 150-year-old elf can violate every law of thermodynamics that exists in reality. Don't come at me with that doesn't make sense. So you're okay with a sword that can talk and make decisions on its own, a black ball of antimatter that can destroy anything it touches. Yeah, just hang in the air like a Christmas ornament.
Falling down a meteor swarm.
Meteor swarm, all this other stuff. But suddenly, when you might be inconvenienced for 3 to 8 sessions by a creepy crawly grabbing a hold of you, suddenly it doesn't make sense. Bullshit. Get out of here with that.
So one thing that I always like to look for, and part of the thing I'm enjoying about going back and looking at the older stuff and then kind of working it forward, is we're seeing influence, and we'll get to that more in a minute. But you see influence of these games even from the 1970s version into pop culture today, right? And you see it in video games where hit points and levels are all over the place. But to me, even the 1970s artwork, and more so in the current one, doesn't that look like a Dementor from Harry Potter?
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
Probably the same, roots. I've noticed that in concepting, like visual stuff. There are archetypes that are just fun to play with and work. So if you give somebody a concept like a Dark Knight, you know what I mean, like a Death Knight or something like that, it's really not about, by default you can make a cool Death Knight, but can you give it an original twist? That's the real trick, because so many people have done it. So yeah, this would be a huge archetype, I would think. Visually probably gets used a lot.
Yeah. And I think probably Dave Sutherland's, at least I think that's Sutherland, or is that, I cannot make out the colophon down there, but we'll just go with Dave Sutherland for the moment. But I think if anything, Sutherland was going with again, assuming the Wraith drawn from Tolkien thematically, when they are unhorsed at the fort of Brunion in at the end of the first half of the Fellowship of the Rings, book 1 of the Fellowship of the Rings, Gandalf and Elrond talk about how they've lost their cloaks and their horses, so they've gone back to Sauron without form. And that I think that is the implication here. Like when Frodo was attacked by them and put the ring on, and he saw them as they truly were, I think that may be what he was trying to capture there. And then as we move forward and our legendarums grow and our pop culture influences grow, you get more into the 5th edition, which, as you accurately point out, Tim, has more of a Dementor's kind of look to it.
And I don't think the artist was influenced by Harry Potter. I'm convinced that, if anything, J.K. Rowling was probably influenced by Tolkien. So it may have come from that same source material, but certainly it's creepy enough to kind of stay on that. Let's just not mess with them. And and even inside Rowling, and maybe this, I who knows if she ever had any interaction with the game, but just by way of her educational upbringing, we know she's come across Tolkien at some point in time. But the soul-sucking version of a Dementor, it just kind of reeks of some of these creatures, right? So
unquestionably,
it to me kind of looks like, again, the game may have found its way into pop culture, maybe not, maybe it's just this was influenced by the same place she was influenced by or something. But anyway, it just sort of hit me when I was putting this together. I'm like, wow, Wraiths do kind of look like and kind of act like and sound like Dementors.
Yep. That 5th edition artwork, by the way, is Justin Sweet.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, well, he's a phenomenal artist. If you look his stuff up,
I like the way he actually can kind of, it looks part skeletal, part muscular, right? He sort of captured that I used to be alive, but now I'm not look. So he did that really well.
He's one of those artists, I would think, if you look at his body of work, you can see he kind of comes out of, I would say, like sort of the Frazetta school. But he's a little more like watercolory. Just beautiful stuff if you look it up. Yep.
Well, Frank Frazetta is one of
I can see that in. I can see slightly where you're coming from there, Richard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If you look at his other work, you'll really see it. I think a little bit. Like,
And here's another one that's, very intelligent, s- sort of lawful. They listen to their boss, but they're evil. But yeah, there's another one. There's another one you just don't mess with, man.
Nope.
And you can't run from them. They're fast, right? So whew. All right, Spectre. And we're not talking about, have you ever seen a spook specter or ghost? Just called Ghostbusters. But at least this time, they might come by themselves. Armor class kind of makes you quake because they're going to be hard to hit. Energy drain. To even hit it, you got to have a +1 or better weapon, and that kind of doesn't get better as you go up in level. It just kind of, they haven't really changed a lot. They, like when we were doing the owlbear lost its ability to hug, which was a cool attack. But reading edition to edition, I'm not seeing any real differences, which is kind of cool, right? It sort of kept it. But and a Spectre, even if you read the lore on it, can kind of take on any shape or whatever. So I like the difference in the artwork between the 70s and today, where you've got sort of that Ghostbusters librarian before she turned on Dan Aykroyd, and then after she turned on Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah, I think that's a nice apt, although and again, and that is most assuredly Dave Sutherland's art there on the left. Back me up, boys. Does that or does that not look like Vigo the Carpathian?
It does.
It does. And again, this is one this is a decade before Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah, but
And
Dan Aykroyd played Dungeons and Dragons
oh,
somewhere
good
along the
Lord,
line.
yes. The guy was probably walking around with AD&D books under his arm going, I definitely think we should go with this look. Okay, Dan, whatever.
We need a crystal skull.
Yeah. The finest crystal of from all of Canada.
I have a bottle of that vodka in the other room. If you're not familiar with it, if anybody's not familiar with it, vodkas come in all kinds of different versions. Dan Aykroyd, a Canadian actor, started a Canadian company to make vodka. It comes in a crystal skull bottle, kind of cool bottles. And it has won Russian vodka awards. So a Canadian is winning Russian vodka awards for its purity.
Yeah.
And it's
the Russians like us because they're like, you handle the code like us.
They're being nice to you because they dumped a radioactive satellite on your country.
Oh yeah, that might be true too.
Yeah, but they have enough open space. Nobody noticed. I was like,
yeah, that's how the moose gets so big.
I have discovered that, when you travel the world as an American, sometimes you get funny looks, but if you tell them you're Canadian, nobody can tell the difference, and you get better service at restaurants. Anyway,
I'll teach you the accent, Tim.
What I love about the AD&D Spectre is he's not only got more hit dice, which means he's hitting harder. There's fewer of them, but you can still get as many as 6. But if you look down in that second paragraph on the left there, a Spectre's chilling touch causes 1 to 8 hit points of damage and drains 2 life levels.
Yep.
So your 8th level fighter goes in against this guy, gets hit a couple of times. He's a 4th level fighter.
Yep. And these, all of these too, like you were saying, Bill, this is where the cleric really shines.
Yeah.
Like the fact that, I think to me in AD&D anyway, the fighter was the thing that really differentiated your fighter was what magic stuff they could get, like a magic sword or magic armor, and you usually deferred that to the fighter. Like, this is an awesome weapon, let's give it to the fighter. But yeah, the cleric, in just being your undead crowd control, like especially in this case where it's like, please stop it.
yeah, exactly. Everybody jumps behind the cleric, and obviously at 7 hit dice, you're not sending this in against like a 2nd or 3rd level party unless you're just a particularly sadistic dungeon master. And if a party stumbles in, I mean, come on, if you're 2nd or 3rd level and you walk into a room and there's a ghostly apparition like this,
Yeah.
Low-level parties are not going to stick around. You know, there's a great quote in the first edition AD&D Player's Handbook that I like. If players refuse to memorize the spell tables, if they don't remember what damage their weapons do, if they don't remember whether or not they have improvision, what languages they have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I can live with that. Please, 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 please remember, avoid unnecessary encounters. So you see Vigo here stepping out of the wall saying, leave this place. Leave that place. If you're a low-level party, leave that place. He has told you, and just by dint of appearance, you know, you should go. The guy who stands there going, I disbelieve. I don't think he'll throw that at us, you know, is very soon joining the Spectre. But that two-level drain is brutal.
So clerics and paladins are your best friend in this case, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
it puts paid to the idea of, well, you know, the cleric is just a heal bot. I don't want to play the cleric. They're just a heal bot. Look, clerics properly played are able fighters. Yep. And they have more spells than just healing. And they can get rid of guys like specters, wights, wraiths, and so on.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to pose both of you forever DM something, and Richard, I'll let you go first on this one. So
okay.
if you had a party full of people who decided they all wanted to play a Kender, who are supposed to be afraid of nothing,
yes,
wouldn't you would you want to defer to a Spectre at some point?
I might defer to a different DM. I don't. I don't know if I could DM a bunch of Kender. I think if everyone said, let's play Kender tonight, I'd figure it out, because I'd be through the half bottle of whiskey to figure that one out. I'd be like, okay, this is going to be crazy. So, and I've done that before. I've had people like, we just want to have a silly game. Can you throw something together? And we're bringing whiskey. And I'm like, sure. Right? And I think it would be in that category.
Richard, let me help you out a little bit, brother. One phrase, three words. Well, 4 words. Sphere of annihilation golem.
By the way,
looks like the Michelin Man, and it wants your Kender.
So
well.
No DM.
Someday we can talk. Someday maybe we can talk about that, because there are the terms they used for different styles of sort of like old school gaming, like the meat grinder, the Monty Hall, that kind of thing. So yeah, if it was like Kender plus meat grinder, right? It's like let's see if any of you can survive the night. That would actually be
the meat grinder.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, let's see how many we can grind up and
summon the Tarrascan powered armor.
The Kender meets the Kender meets Sweeney Todd.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. One more. So the Succubus. The difference I have found in the Succubus between early level and later version is there's now a boy version called the Incubus.
Right.
Yeah.
Outside of that, there wasn't a huge amount of change in them, but I want people to pay attention to something. And there's another page after this, so where these might have been influenced from. Thank you, Bill, for that. By the way, adults only on the next page. Look at their charisma. They're rare, and dear God, are they charismatic. So it cannot be harmed by any sort of normal weaponry right there, right? Succubus can cause darkness up to 5 feet, and the kiss of the succubus drains the victim of 1 energy level.
That's right. You're going to pay for that. And they're the classic, you know, from medieval myth. You'd have the succubi would visit the men at night, and then they'd become incubi and visit the ladies at night, and you know, all kinds of naughty things. But I kid about this a lot on on Twitter sometimes when people post a picture of a vampirus or succubus or something like that. I'll just respond with, I've had a good run. But yeah, no, they're going to drain your levels. And of all these, I mean, the succubus is not per se undead, but they're definitely not the cheerleader from up the block. Because if you look at them in AD&D, they have psionic powers. I mean, if they get tired of your BS, you're like, gosh, ma'am, can I get you a cherry Coke? She's just gonna be, just have done with you. And they obviously they gained a bit more wardrobe in later editions because boobies are verboten. But they have a whole raft of abilities that level draining undead don't. And I have I got to be really careful how I phrase this. I have utilized as opponents in game succubi to great effect in Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not going to say that shorter. I'm not going to give you a Reader's Digest version of that phrase, but as opponents to send against characters, they are dangerously effective.
So
yeah,
Bill, you sent this over, and then we're going to loop back in and have a little deeper discussion on some of this. But I always like to look for what influenced the art, or what influenced how these things are put together, and especially in the 70s when TSR was new and Dungeons and Dragons were new. On other videos, it was like, where'd they come up with this idea? Well, it came out of a box of toys that they got at some drugstore someplace for 50 cents. This succubus, the succubus, we think, has a very specific influence point that came out shortly before the picture from the older version. Pretty sure that's it right there. So that just looks too damn close to not be related in some fashion. By the way, the cover on that one is Barbara Streisand, and certainly the succubus has shorter hair, but I'm pretty sure that's close.
Yeah.
So I don't want to leave that one up too long. YouTube would flag me for something.
The story behind that one, because Richard, I don't know if you've heard this, and this is hilarious, but Dave Sutherland and Dave Trampier they went to a corner store, and I probably know which one it was in Lake Geneva, but they went to a corner store, and Dave Trampier he was not fronted by this at all. They got their sandwiches, their beer, whatever, and they went up to the counter, and Sutherland's looking for art inspiration. He's like, "Hey, give me that. This is an October 1977 issue. If you guys want some ephemera, some D&D trivia history, you can go pick up a copy on eBay." I'm told, I think that's a rumor I heard.
Those came out of Bill's personal collection, by
the way. Anyway, but so Sutherland is like, "Yeah, give me that copy of the magazine." And Dave Trampier, who was a bit more shy and reserved about that kind of thing, was the one who was buying lunch there, and apparently was like so mortified at his friend buying an adult magazine and just smacking it down on the counter that he paid for the stuff and scooped it all up and ran out of the store with the clerk saying, "Wait, you forgot your change," but he never went back for it. So that's the story, and the, how shall I say, fil de joie in that issue of Playboy is effectively nameless. She was given nom de guerre of Honey Wells, but I don't think that's her real name. So there you go. Now you know where the succubus picture came from in the Monster Manual, kids. Ask your parents.
So all these undead creatures, I think it's interesting sometimes to kind of look at the influence of where they got some of this stuff and kind of work it backwards. Like, so the succubus, I mean, that can probably go all the way back to Greek mythology, right? Where they were calling out to get you to come up. I forget what they were called, the muse or something.
The Sirens.
Sirens, thank you.
Mhm.
I think you could almost trace it that far back to like the siren song saying, trying to pull people in and
Sure.
seductively get people to come across. So, am I missing an example of that? Because I think it may go that far back.
I think it probably goes that far back. I think with the Succubus, there's probably man, Tim, I'm not being crass here, but I know a little bit of the lore, but I don't know if it's too sensitive to mention on your show. I don't want you to get flagged by YouTube.
I don't care. It's like
Okay, well, so I have heard one of the possible origins was young man having nocturnal emission. They'd wake up in the morning and there's a mess on the sheets. Well, what happened last night? Clearly, this doesn't just happen to a person. Maybe it was an evil, beautiful demon spirit that visited me and caused this. That must be what it was. Let's go pray about this, And I have heard that is a possible point of origin of the more modern, as in year 1000 forward, legend for the Succubus. But I definitely think the idea of it, the seed of it being the Sirens, probably ties very closely into that too.
Yeah.
Richard, do you have any idea on any of this stuff? Because the only one that I come up with was the Sirens. Any of these where you think the origin story might have come from?
Well, with a lot of these, okay, there was a point when I was a kid. I was probably in around junior high-ish age, and I stumbled on first Bullfinch's mythology. And then I'd talk to the librarian, because at that time you go to a library, and I said, "Do you have more stuff like this?"
He had a card catalog, and librarians knew things, right?
Dewey Decimal System, baby.
You had to go ask the person. It was just amazing.
Yeah. So this was actually like, and the way they had the library set up, it was right on the, it was right next to like fantasy. So it's like mythology led into fantasy. And I was like, this is pretty great. So early on, even when I was a kid, there was a lot of that. To me, it was like the fantasy brands like D&D and other entertainment was there. And then there was this actual mythology from these kind of religion, or formerly some of them were religions, some of them were just beliefs, like mythologies. So to me, I always found it really interesting, like with all these monsters, like the Incubus and Succubus, I think came out sort of Judeo-Christian. You could even possibly link them back to like Jinn or something like that.
Sure. And the idea of a female devil, that goes back to Lilith, from
the Lamia
mythology, the Lamia. So yeah, there's a lot of a lot of data points like that, I think, that play into the Succubus model.
Wait. Female devils don't just go back to Elizabeth Hurley and Bedazzled?
I don't know. You're closer to knowing Elizabeth Hurley than me, Tim. So I'm going to let you ask that.
There was okay. Here's a little tidbit of a thing that I always found kind of fun. I think it might have been AD&D Monster Manual 2. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Bill. That had Pazuzu.
Yes, Pazuzu was in Monster Manual 2. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and this is just a little string. Like, so Pazuzu is also in The Exorcist.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell that they based the likeness off of that statue.
Yeah.
But I think, if I remember correctly, I'll have to look up the channel. I was listening to a historian months ago now, talk about actual Pazuzu, and I think he was actually a protecting kind of deity. People put those statues in their windows to protect them from evil spirits. Pazuzu was scary to scare away bad things. So to me, that was the whole. There's a lot of things in when I get to D&D. If you look into the actual mythologies, you can realize like, oh, D&D defined it this way, but then the actual mythologies have a lot of these different takes, and they end up blending together, because of different cultures over the centuries. And I always found that fascinating. It's like, for example, the D&D Gorgon, which is a big metallic, bull that is in hell. But Greek mythology, a Gorgon is sort of more of a hag, a seer. Medusa is a Gorgon.
Yeah, Medusa is a Gorgon, and that's but then turning to stone petrification is a whole nother jam.
Yeah. But I would say on this topic, like D&D wise, like level drain, history stuff aside, level drain, save versus death, petrification, there were a lot of these mechanics that were they made your game risky and scary, and that could be really fun.
Well, as a player, I kind of like, I mean, if we're just here to roll and see who gets what treasure, I mean, I'm kind of bored, right? It's trying to figure out how to problem solve and have everybody live and get through it without just becoming a hack and slash murder hobo. That's kind of the fun to the game, right? Otherwise it's relatively boring. And even like with some video games, and as a technology guy, there's some desire for me to get in the video game industry at this point in my career, because I'm at a point where I can kind of do whatever I want. And that's always sounded kind of cool. But I started thinking about the games that have been sort of everybody adopted, everybody played it. And then I played it and I'm like, I'm really that excited, because you just kind of attack everything you see. There's nothing else besides attack, heal, attack, heal, attack, heal. That's all there is to it. And the games in my head that always stick out as the ones I go back to and I still play today are ones that have more strategy level kind of stuff involved in it. Right. And that's what I like about these creatures is as a party, you have to come together and you have to have a well-balanced party. Otherwise you're screwed. Right. And your cleric has to have made that game session. Otherwise you're really screwed. It's not just go up and hack it to death. There's actually more to it. And that's the exciting part to me, is when you actually have to think through this stuff. Rather than just sort of brute force your way through it.
Oh yeah. And that's where that brings it back around full circle. Parties murder hoboing their way through a multi-story massive dungeon, and suddenly your entire campaign comes to a halt because Bob, the 5th level magic user, who's raining death on the monsters, gets the bad touch a couple of times, and now he's Bob, the 1st level prestidigitator. What do?
He can't remember. Do I point my finger at them to use magic missile, or does it go up my nose? I have no idea.
Exactly. and that's what makes the level draining undead or otherworldly creatures so fun to use from a DMing standpoint, and from a playing standpoint, to be like, how do we get past this? Do we trust that girl that needs our help to get her kitten out of the well, or what do?
I almost wish we had terms for style of play, because like I was saying, like Meat Grinder, Monty Hall are sort of examples, but there's no other game that has this variety where people like just their style, the way they run it, the way players play it. Like Skyrim is an experience where you run around, you explore, you do all that stuff. It's distinctively different from Dark Souls, which can be like you screw up and you lose just stuff, like,
and the game lets in no uncertain terms, doesn't boot you back to you died,
Yeah, exactly. And that to me is, I wish there was terms like that for D&D, so at least so people could communicate like this is basically the style we're playing. There's no need to argue about what's the right way to play. It's more like, what are you doing? Which style?
So that's an interesting point, because I'm about to get back into DMing myself on a more regular basis, which I haven't for a long time. And some people have asked me, so what's your style of DM? And I think I'm just going to send them that picture from Dragon's Lair where the guy crosses his arms and turns into a skeleton. Like that's
Nice.
that's me as a DM. As the guy gets fried and turned into a skeleton, gives you a dirty look. Like, again, really? And that is that. And Bill, you and I have talked about this, and you know, I'll play just about any of the four existing editions, first, second, third, or fifth of Dungeons and Dragons that are out there. Really depends on the people at the table, because that's really kind of why you're there. But to me, some of the later editions with the gazillion saving throws and all these ways to keep your characters alive, it kind of takes the fun out of it, right? Because you want to be able to lose a character on occasion. You want to be able to say, oops, I walked through a door and got blown up. Maybe don't walk through a door that without checking for traps first, right? You know?
Yeah.
The consequences matter, and I think that's a big deal. And also, I think, you know, how you start a game matters, because, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, we met at a tavern. It's always a tavern, right? And Harmony Ginger, and if anybody's listening and it doesn't subscribe to Harmony, she's a great channel on both Twitter and on YouTube. Great person. She had a party. She's about to start DMing when I saw on her Twitter feed that her party came to her and they wanted to try something new. It's like, okay, let's pretend it's the night after the tavern, but none of us can remember what happened and we're all hungover. I was like, that's actually kind of an interesting way to start a game. It's like, it's like The Hangover. How did we get here? And what the hell is going on? I'm like, that's actually kind of neat.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so leave it, and she will probably come up with an interesting way to do that. But anyway, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you guys. Level draining is of course a fun one, and I think more DMs should use it. I think it shouldn't be as, especially for higher level complex games, it should probably come in, and because you can take these creatures out if you think through it. You just gotta be careful. And kind of know what you're doing. So I'm not sure what characters we're going to do next, but I'm going to try to come up with one that might be a little more interesting. I'm thinking about going through and doing a video on dragons, because we haven't done that. But not just like, hey, the blue dragon throughout the years. It's like, what are the different colors of dragons? What are the differences between them, and why does that actually matter? I know a lot of people are like, oh, I know that, but I think people kind of know there's a difference, but I'm not sure anybody really is, unless you've read the Dragonlance, really
Well,
figured it out.
If you want to do that video, Tim, I will get you the history on why there's multicolored dragons in AD&D.
Bring it on, man.
I will.
That sounds awesome.
Let's dig that one, because I think that one is important, because especially when you get into 5th edition and you see the Dragonborn player characters, I think that matters, right? Because the breath weapons are all different, the character alignments are all different, kind of how they behave is all different, and you can't just show up as a player, and this is sort of a player responsibility, and say, oh, I'm going to play all characters like it's Tim, right? That doesn't, it's not really the point, right? So I'm a lawful evil Tim, I'm a chaotic good, I'm a lawful good Tim. Those are two entirely different worlds, right? So you have to treat those things differently. And like Dragonborn and Kender. And the one mistake people make with Kender, and I will support every DM on this, is most people play Kender like they're just kleptomaniac freaks. And I don't think that was the original intent, because Margaret Weiss explained it on Twitter one day, the way she plays Kender, and I think she's one of the people we can trust as an expert on this, is she tells the DM, take one item from everybody and put it in my pack, but don't tell them or me what it is until they need it. I'm like, that's a creative way to do it. But I think most people play Kender as just weird kleptomaniacs, and that's not really the point. So that's a whole different video. All right, we're going to do dragons next. Thank you guys for your time today, and I'll link everybody's stuff in the description, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Peace.